Welcome to Environment Cafe 613, hosted by the Ottawa Environment Forum. It's a pleasure to see you all, both online and in person, as we explore the topic of biodiversity and citizen science. We're delighted to be joined by our guest speaker from the Canadian Wildlife Federation, James Pagé, who will speak about using the iNaturalist app to conserve, contribute, and connect. We acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the traditional stewards of the Ottawa region. I'm your moderator for this evening. My name is Sherry Kelly. The Ottawa Environment Forum is a Baha'i-inspired group that hosts monthly talks and an annual fair to connect the community around environmental issues, aiming to foster understanding, dialogue, and action for sustainability. As a faith group, we are dedicated to working to bring about spiritual and material progress founded on the oneness of humankind. Our aim is to bring spiritual insights and solutions to the overarching environmental challenge of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, to restore balance and build a sustainable and flourishing world. I would like to make everyone aware that this evening's presentation will be recorded and that the views expressed are those of the individuals and not of the Ottawa Baha'i community or its institutions. We'll begin with a short multi-faith devotional featuring readings on nature from the successive religious traditions, of which the Baha'i faith is the most recent. This evening's writings reflect spiritual themes, including the interdependence of man with the environment, the sacred nature of God's creation, and the value of biodiversity. We hope you enjoy the writings.
Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. Chief Seattle.
Reflect upon the inner realities of the universe, the secret wisdoms involved, the enigmas, the interrelationships, the rules that govern all. For every part of the universe is connected with every other part by ties that are very powerful and admit no imbalance nor any slackening or whatever. Abdullah.
In all that God created in this world, the Holy One did not create a single thing without purpose.
In the tradition, to forget how to dig the earth and to tend the soil is to forget ourselves. Mahatma Gandhi.
Sufi tradition. Every particle of the world is a mirror. In each atom lies the blazing light of 1,000 suns. Cleave the heart of a raindrop, 100 pure oceans will flow forth. Mahmoud Shabestari, the mirror of this world.
Christian tradition. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. Gerard Manley Hopkins, God's grandeur.
Consider the flowers of a garden, though differing in kind, color, form, and shape, yet inasmuch as they are refreshed by the waters of one spring, revived by the breath of one wind, invigorated by the rays of one sun, this diversity increaseth their charm and addeth unto their beauty. How unpleasing to the eye, if all the flowers and plants, the leaves and blossoms, the fruit, the branches, and the trees of that garden were all of the same shape and color. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you, readers, for sharing these beautiful selections of spiritual wisdom throughout the ages. And next, we'll have some music. I'd like to introduce Seema Malali. Seema began playing violin at age 3 and now performs with the Ottawa Pops Orchestra. She enjoys music across all genres and especially movie soundtracks. Seema recently graduated from Carleton University and works at the Federal Office of the Correctional Investigator.
There is no sound.
The names of the pieces. That was Le Cygne, The Swan by Saint-Saëns, very famous piece. I'm sure a lot of you guys know it. The next one is Concerto in G Major by Seitz. Not sure it's percent. Hi, welcome.
It's wonderful to see a young musician so talented. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, James Pagé. James has been at the Canadian Wildlife Federation for 15 years as the Species at Risk and Biodiversity Specialist. He works on various projects at CWF, including turtle recovery work, rare species surveys, endangered bat recovery, and community science. Working with the developers at iNaturalist, James has been the lead in the creation and management of iNaturalist Canada. iNaturalist has become one of the largest community science platforms to connect with nature and contribute to science. James is also a member of several environmental committees and science advisory boards. Friends, please join me in welcoming James.
Thank you. Is everyone seeing that? Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Yeah, great. All right, so yeah, I'm James, as the introduction just said. I'm with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. I do work on a few things, species at risk primarily as well, but the community science or citizen science, we're kind of transitioning to the term community science. It's a bit more inclusive than what's typically considered a citizen, so it's a little less of a loaded term. So we're transitioning over to that as calling it community science. But I'm going to talk a little bit about. Second. There we go. A little bit about biodiversity in Canada generally, and also in Ottawa. A few examples of how we monitor it as scientists and specialists, but in ways we can connect with and get involved in, as everybody, in biodiversity conservation work and actions that can help conserve it. So biodiversity is basically the variety of living things we have, and the interconnectedness of those, so how each one interacts with another. We have pretty fortunate in Canada to have amazing habitats and huge diversity of wildlife. We have the prairies to the coast and beautiful wetlands and forests. Canada's expanded. We figure we have about 70,000 different species in Canada. A lot of those are insects and plants. That's a lot. There's also another almost 70,000 that scientists believe exist in Canada that just have not been recorded yet. And then most of those are probably obscure things like some insects and fungi, but there are some less obscure things. And I'm going to show a couple examples of things that have been found in Canada that we didn't know existed here before, or existed and we thought aren't here anymore. And we have some species that are called endemic. That means they only exist in Canada. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. We have a few examples of the Vancouver Island marmot, the Banff spring snails. They don't live anywhere else. Canada is the only place in the world those exist. There's a few breeding birds too that only breed and nest in Canada. They might migrate south, but Canada is their only nesting zone. So we have some pretty cool and key species here. We also have a lot of species at risk. We have more than 800 species that are at risk of extinction at various degrees, but we have 70,000 species, but still 800 at risk of extinction is considerable. And we see these nice pristine images of beautiful habitat, coastlines. This is not what a lot of species habitat looks like in Canada. This is a bit more of a typical habitat in, obviously there's a lot of wilderness, but where these species at risk occur, there's a lot of them that live in habitats like this that are fragmented by human population, by our roads, by our developments. So, a lot of the reason that species are at risk in Canada, there's depends on the species, but writ large, we can kind of attribute it to habitat loss. And most of the time that habitat loss is because of us. So some of the species we have at risk in Canada, we have the monarch butterfly, some things people may not know that are actually endangered. The monarch is endangered in Canada. The American eel, we have American eel here in the Ottawa River, also an endangered species. Every single one of our freshwater turtle in Canada is at risk. They're not all endangered. Some are considered special concern, which is a little less at risk, but they're still listed. And about half of the species of bats that we have in Canada are considered at-risk species. So we monitored some of these species, the at-risk ones and the not so at-risk ones as well. We have reports and evaluations, like the wild species report that the federal government issues. It's not the federal government that like does all the research, but the report comes out from the federal government on the status of how species are doing across the country. This is kind of a broad scale look at how all the species are doing. Then there's specifically the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada that meets twice a year to assess the status of these at-risk species. So they do a full science investigation. There's a report written on each species, and they do an assessment to determine, based on a bunch of scientific criteria and partially mirrored off the IUCN criteria of what species are endangered in Canada. We have scientists doing field surveys and studies. There's remote sensing, like satellite imagery, but also remote sensing in terms of drone surveys or radio telemetry stuff where we can put collars or tags on animals and they fly by a tower and that picks up the tag and we can track where species go. These are just a few examples. This isn't the full breadth of how people or how scientists monitor biodiversity. But there's also another way we monitor biodiversity. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the stronger tools that we have, and this is people. And thinking about community science, of like scientists can't be everywhere. They can't record everything and they just, there's no way they can amass the amount of data that we need to have to understand biodiversity all on their own. And so enter the community scientists, which is basically everyday people that can contribute valuable information that can be used for science and conservation. And I'm going to talk about iNaturalist, which is arguably the fastest growing community science platform in the world. We have iNaturalist Canada, but it exists elsewhere around the world. There are many other, besides iNaturalist, community science initiatives, and it's not just environment. There's, Health Canada has community science initiatives, NASA has community science initiatives, and it's basically everybody that can contribute to science, not just conservation science. We're going to focus back on iNaturalist, where we have more than 22 million observations of species in Canada. These are not all different species. We have 44,000 different species in iNaturalist in Canada. But with this, people are able to upload information that can be used for science. And each one of these observations is a point that's mapped that can be used for not just scientists, but the everyday public as well. But a key thing behind this is there's people behind every one of these observations. So 22 million times somebody has stopped, taken a photo of a species that exists in their space. So there's a huge connection element every time someone can connect with nature to see and appreciate something that's there, even if it's just for a second to snap a photo. I mentioned iNaturalist exists around the world. So there's 20 countries that have their own version like we do here in Canada. And so this is a global database of biodiversity information. Arguably, probably the largest database of multi-species observations around the world. And we lead it here at Canadian Wildlife Federation, but in partnership with NatureServe Canada, which they deal with sensitive species data, wildlife species data, and Parks Canada, which I'm sure everybody knows. So there's a value in this, and there's not a value just for science. I'm going to talk first about what's a value to all of us, personal information. So as I said, this is kind of a heat map of where all the observations are in Canada for species. And we have the darker red areas where we have more number of observations, but we have observations right up through to the tip of Baffin Island. So a lot of coverage across all of Canada. But we can explore that data. And every one of us can use this to look at what species occur in our neighborhoods, where in the next camping trip we might go on, or what hike we might do, what species we might find and encounter while we're there. So as we zoom in on the map, here we're seeing Ottawa. Still a big heat map of general concentrations of observations, but as we zoom in a little closer, we can see individual points, and every one of these is somewhere that somebody's taken an observation and uploaded it to iNaturalist. We're about here on the map right now. Across the street, somebody saw a affiliated woodpecker. This was back in 2024, but that's mapped, it existed there. That's a relatively common bird, but it's a beautiful bird to see. There are snapping turtles. Most of these blue dots that we see along in the Rideau River there, most of those are snapping turtle or painted turtle observations. As I mentioned, those are all species at risk in Canada. They're special concern species, so they do occur quite regularly, but we can use this just to know what species live around us, and you can check out your own neighborhood on iNaturalist. This is all looking at the website at iNaturalist.ca, and you can zoom in and out and look at all the data and all the points, like I said, for Ottawa, but for anywhere around the world as well. And if we click on here, there's a species tab that we can see. If we click on that, it'll show us the most observed species, and this is for the Ottawa area. We have more than, or nearly 700,000 observations of species in the Ottawa area alone, covering about 10,000 different species. These are the most observed things that we see. Probably not a surprise to everybody. Well, bearded turtles out there. I wouldn't have thought it would be one of the more common things observed. We can also filter this by species at risk, and these are the most species at risk observed in the Ottawa area. I should mention though, the northern leopard hawk you see there and the blue spotted salamander are not actually at risk in Ottawa. They're at risk in other parts of their range, but we can't like filter that precisely in iNaturalist. It just means that they're at risk somewhere in Canada. These are listed and designated species at risk that we have in Canada, and this is all the ones the top ones we've recorded in Ottawa. So that's kind of some way we can use it for our own, knowledge, connecting with nature, even if we're not even outside, we can figure out what lives around us. There's the value to science that I'm going to talk about a little bit too. So some of my colleagues have used iNaturalist data to look at how the incidence of boat strikes on map turtle and how frequently map turtles are getting hit by boats in the range here in Canada. And using photos, they can figure out which ones look like they have a strike from a boat, and we've mapped that out and figured out what proportion it is. We can look at invasive species in Canada. There's publications that use the iNaturalist data for that. Mussel surveys, which are a bit of an obscure species, but iNaturalist has been used to do specific surveys for mussels, and just general biodiversity baseline information data, like things like a BioBlitz, where people can record things in a given area. There are roughly 10,000 scientific publications that have made use of iNaturalist data. There was a study that was done, it covered about a period of 7 years, and during that period, what they looked at, there's roughly 4 scientific publications per day that was using iNaturalist data. So it's a huge resource for scientists. And we have completely new species. So Portuguese man-of-war is not a new species. It was thought to be one single species though, but thanks to a bunch of images through iNaturalist data, they actually found out there's 3 other species that look identical to it, but they're different enough that they're actually 3 new species to science that they thought originally it was just one single species. There was it's a danger plant, but actually it's considered an extirpated plant. So meaning it no longer existed in Canada through that committee that I talked about that assesses species at risk. They designated this as being gone from Canada completely. That was about 20 years ago they designated that. The last time this thing had been seen in Canada was 40 years ago. It was found in iNaturalist because of an iNaturalist observer back in 2018, but then got confirmed and reassessed. But just recently it was considered to be, yes, it actually exists again in Canada. It hadn't been seen for 40 years. What I think the cool part about this though, is this is the person who first observed it. They thought it was, it said it looked like that super rare one, which was the one that's endangered, that was lost, called the Illinois tick trefoil. They thought, well, there's no way it's probably a more common thing. So they identified it first as like a bit of a more common species. Somebody else, another botanist from Canada, also looked at it and said, yeah, I think it's a common species, but not the one you thought it was, and here's why. And then a scientist from the US looked at it and said, no, this is the Illinois tick trefoil, and lists the reasoning of why they think it is that. And other people weighed in and figured out that this is actually this plant that was extinct from Canada. So these are people that can weigh in on observations in iNaturalist that have looked at this and saw the photo and like, oh yeah, this is something really rare and really cool. And the takeaway from this is you don't actually have to know what that species is when you take a photo of it and add it to iNaturalist, and it's really still useful for science. And this is actually refound this species in, it's in Brantford, Ontario. So now there's going to be conservation work to protect that species because it's actually now only thought to be in that one small site. There's also a hydrilla species that was recently found in Lake Erie. It's the first occurrence of this thing in Canada. It's a new species to Canada, but not a great news story because it's invasive and it could become like water milfoil and take over a little bit of the waterways, but something we need to look at to monitor the spread of invasive species. And we can use iNaturalist to do that. That if now this is observed in some other watershed, we can track where that's going, and hopefully some effort can be made to stop it as well. So I want to take a bit of a step back. I've talked about all the value of this, but I want to talk about what iNaturalist actually is. It's kind of like social media meets science, where instead of taking selfies, people are flipping the camera around and taking a picture of other living things. Where there's very simple to use app. An app doesn't work for everything, so there's also on the website where you can drag and drop photos from a digital photos that you have saved on your computer from the camera. And both of these incorporate image recognition software that help you identify the species. But it's not just the software, as I mentioned, as I showed that example, there's a lot of other experts on iNaturalist that can help you identify things too. So I'm going to walk a little bit through how the app works. There's two images here. The iPhone version is a little bit different from the Android version for those of you that have different devices. The iPhone is on the left, Android is on the right. Still works that way, yeah. Very similar steps, but they're a little bit different. So the first thing I would suggest anybody to do if you have the app for the first time, or if you have your account, is to look at your account setting or the settings of the app, because there's a few things I think it can make it easier to use. For one, you go into the settings, so that was those 3 lines of the menu bar, and you can tap settings on either the Android or iPhone app, those are the same. It brings you to these settings options. I suggest to uncheck the automatic upload, because then when you take photos, it doesn't automatically just submit it to the platform. It gives you a chance to kind of review things before it just goes in, unless you're okay with that, which some people are. I like to look at mine first or review them first before I upload them onto the database where then it's publicly visible. You can still always go back and update things after the fact though too. I'm using Android most of the time, so I'm a little less familiar with the iPhone app, but when I was playing around with it, I would definitely suggest to go into this advanced mode and tap this button that allows you many more options for recording observations. So you can record sound this way, and you can choose images from your device as opposed to using just the camera. Versus the AI option that you see below the iNaturalist AI camera, I find that the suggestions aren't quite as good, and it limits kind of how you can add observations. Again, it comes down to personal preference. There's a few other things you can kind of check through and figure out how you might want it configured. You can always go back and change these things after the fact too. So we've got the app set up. If you're at a place like this and you want to take a photo, record something for iNaturalist, let's say we're going to photo these trees here. This is not so good of an iNaturalist observation. Nobody's going to be able to tell you what that tree in the background is, and it's not really that useful. So we're going to get a lot closer. So we'll get closer, we're going to open up our app. We're going to tap the plus button, which will give us the option to take a photo. So we're going to have to take a photo, which in both apps will open up a camera. Now we're closer, a pile of leaves on the ground still isn't all that useful. So instead of saying, I know there's a tree here, there's some leaves to show it. Let's get a little closer and get a photo of a leaf that you can actually identify. So you use your camera, you get in on something close, and notice here I've even got the trunk of the tree in the background, so you can get the leaf and the trunk all in one photo. Now with the iPhone, you can take, a real benefit of that I find is you can take multiple photos and then upload them. So if you want to take the trunk, the leaf, the twig, you can do all that and then hit the check button, and then it goes to this observation page. Now, depending on how you configured your iPhone app, as you see on the left, sometimes it'll go right through it and give you a species ID, that option right away. In which case, if you think it's the red oak, you can check that. If you've configured it a different way, it'll show you this screen just like we see in the Android app. So you actually see the details to add in for your observation. So in this case, I've taken one photo each app of the leaf with the trunk in the background. Notice how the date and location are automatically pulled from the app, so that automatically goes in and it pulls that from your phone, so you don't have to do anything with that. So maybe we want to capture another photo though, and maybe I didn't capture a photo of the bark or of the trunk of the tree. We want to do that, so in both cases you can tap that plus or the camera symbol, which again opens up our camera, like we did before. We take the picture, the check mark, and now we have an extra photo in there of the bark or the trunk of the tree. Now here we can identify our species. If we didn't have that option already in the iPhone app, we do it now, you can identify the species. It uses the location of where you are to narrow down your observations. So if there's an oak that exists in the southern US, it won't give you that as an option because it knows you're in Canada, that's not within the range of that oak. So that uses your location and the image itself to identify what species you're looking at. Now, you need internet connection to be able to do this. Especially within the Android app. The iPhone app you can actually use offline, but the suggestions it gives you isn't quite as good as what you get online. So I would definitely suggest using the online ability. If you're out somewhere and you don't have data on your phone, I would skip this step entirely and just leave it blank to identify the species, and I'll show you why you can go back to that after the fact. If you have enough data on your phone, you're not worried about it, you can do this next step and there's no problem. But if you're trying to conserve your data, you don't have to do this right now. What you would do, let's go back to this. So what you would do is you would save this observation as it is, and then you can go back when you're back at your Wi-Fi spot at home, you can connect your Wi-Fi, you can go back into your observation and do this now, because if you've set it to not upload automatically, it's just saved in your queue, and you can, like, waiting to upload. You tap on that observation again, and it'll come back to this screen while you're on Wi-Fi, and you can enter all this information now. So say we got Wi-Fi, we tap on that what did you see button or the identify button, it's going to give you a suggestion for the species. In this case, it's showing us, it's looking just at that trunk of the tree picture that I took in both apps here. It's not very good at identifying the bark of a tree from a photo. Understandably, a lot of experts aren't good at identifying the bark of trees. And so what you can do is you can swipe left or right or tap the other photo. And now it's looking at the leaf specifically. And in this case, both apps are telling us the top suggestion is northern red oak, which it actually is. If you're not sure, I wouldn't just blindly trust the app. I mean, you can see the photos of that, which is great. You can also just choose the higher level, in this case, just oaks. That's also good, because I'm pretty sure it's an oak. If you're not sure it's a northern red oak or a white oak or a swamp white oak, then you can just choose oaks, and then someone else in the community, like we saw with that Illinois tick trefoil example, someone can help you identify that. Once you choose your species, if you're sure it's a red oak, you tap the check mark. If you already know what it was and you didn't need that at all, you can just tap it in the search bar and write your species in, and then the option will come up and you just select that. And then now we have our species identified in our observations screen. Can add a note. Sometimes it's helpful, like if you say it was growing in a really dry forest area, that's where red oaks grow as opposed to like a swamp white oak. So it might help someone else identify the observation for you because you've added a few extra notes. As you mentioned, the location was automatically added. This here, the geoprivacy tab basically means your default is set that your observation, once it's mapped, someone will be able to see exactly where that is on the map. There may be times where you don't want that, if that's your backyard or somewhere in your property, or if it's a species that you don't want people to know exactly where it is. You can tap this option and choose the visibility to be what's called obscured. And that puts it at a random point in about a 200 square kilometer square. So it randomizes it, but then us and our partners, and when we share it for science, we get the true location. So even if you obscure it for the public, and we don't share that with the public, but we get that and we can use that for science, and we can share it with researchers as long as they don't then make it public. So that's still useful. So you can always choose that. One other option that it'll give you is private, which kind of makes your observation useless. It doesn't map it at all. So if it's something you just want to keep track of yourself for your own knowledge, you could do it that way. But if you choose it to be private, then no one else can see that on iNaturalist, and then we won't access that. We respect privacy. If someone chooses to not show that, we won't access that and we won't share it. But then it doesn't get used for conservation. Captive or cultivated, if that oak tree happened to be one that I planted or somebody planted, actually that one did happen to be one I planted. So I would check this box to say it's captive or cultivated. Cultivated basically means somebody planted it there. Captive would be like your dog, your cat, or a zoo animal. So you want to check that to make sure that people know that, you know, that jaguar didn't actually exist here in Canada. And then we don't have to really worry about projects. That's a bit of a side conversation with, there's different initiatives that are created within iNaturalist to as projects, and this is all talking about the Seed of Nature Challenge, but a lot of them are set to basically automatically add observations. So there's not much you have to do as an observer to contribute to the budget piece. When you're ready, you can tap the check mark. It adds it to the queue, so that it's waiting to be uploaded. And this is where you can do this when you're away from your house. You leave it there, it doesn't take any data. When you get back, you tap on this observation again, and it opens up that same observation screen, and you can enter that information back when you're at the Wi-Fi. So you can save your data. When you're all done, you tap the upload button and then it maps it to the database. And then it's shareable instantly for conservation work. Anybody can go and see that, and it adds to everybody's knowledge of biodiversity in your area. You can also, if you tap the green button, before we took a photo, you can also upload photos from your device. So if you have old photos that you haven't been a part of iNaturalist yet, you can go back through old pictures, upload them as well. This is also good if you need to take a couple of quick photos of something that's running away. You can just take the photos with your phone and then use this option to then upload a photo you just took. I find it a little quicker that way sometimes. But there's more than to iNaturalist than just the app. So when you're looking at a turtle on a log from this far away with your phone, you say, I swear there's a turtle there. That's not nearly as good as using a digital camera and actually getting the zoom in. So you can take photos with a digital camera and then use the website to drag and drop photos the same way you would for moving files around into the iNaturalist app. So key thing for a good observation is get close and you can actually see what you're taking a picture of. Some other things that make a good observation, again, there's a lichen on this log that's going crossways, but zooming in and getting a really sharp photo in close is a much better observation. Somebody can actually identify that versus something like that, and they have to try and figure out what you're even trying to take a picture of. Again, try and capture identifying features that you can identify something. Someone probably could tell that there's a garter snake in that photo, which is right in the middle, and an expert could probably identify it. But a close-up picture with in focus, you can see the stripes on the side that identifies this as a garter snake versus something that's kind of similar as a ribbon snake, which looks very similar, but has a kind of a yellow stripe more in front of the eye. So something like that, you can capture distinguishing features. Sometimes a faraway shot, you might need to get the overall picture of a species. But in this case, you might want to take multiple observations of multiple photos of the same observation. So here we've got the Scotch pine, finding a cone on the ground, getting needles as well. All of those you added to the same observation, and then that's a lot more evidence of what that species is. So now we know how to take good observations. So I get a question all the time, like, well, what do I take photos of? And my answer is kind of everything, anything alive, lichens, mushrooms, insects, bugs, worms, especially with the City Nature Challenge, that there's not a whole lot out right now. Kind of use your imagination a little bit and try and figure out what you want to take pictures of. The spider down in your basement works too. And you can do that anywhere. And there's initiatives like the City Nature Challenge that starts tomorrow, which you can put this all into practice. There are more than 900 cities around the world during the same 4 days that are using iNaturalist to record biodiversity. It's like the world's largest bioblitz. And so last year we had more than 3 million observations recorded in just 4 days around the world. And that was with about 700 cities. So we expect to blow that out of the park this year and get a lot of observations, maybe 4 or 5 million in just 4 days. The first year they did this, it kind of broke iNaturalist to crash and couldn't handle the observations that they were getting in. So Ottawa and Gatineau are taking part. There are other cities taking part, especially for those of you online. And if there's anybody outside of Canada, if you head to citynaturechallenge.org, you get a list of all the participating cities. Here in Canada, you can visit citynaturechallenge.ca. Or if you want to find out what Canadian cities are taking part, you go to iNaturalist.ca/projects, or if you go to iNaturalist page and you find the projects page, you can get a list of all the participating cities. There's that map that you just saw as well. If you're in a participating city, all you have to do is use iNaturalist. Starting tomorrow till Monday, use iNaturalist, everything automatically just goes in. If you're not in one of the participating cities, we've created this non-registered city project. So this is only for people not in one of those. We have 42 cities in Canada. If you're not in one of those 42 cities, you would find this in the project list. You go click that link and it takes you to this project. And in this one part, you have to click the join button. For any of the other participating cities, you don't have to do this step, but if you're not in one of those and you want your observations to count, you have to join the project for it to automatically go in. Then all you have to do is make your observations. So if you're in participating cities, so if you're in Ottawa or Gatineau, Greater Ottawa area, so it's a pretty big area, Just use iNaturalist, your observation is gonna automatically get pulled into that project and it goes into the Ottawa tally, the Canada tally, and the national tally. Just by uploading your observation between Friday and Monday. And if you join the non-registered cities, the same thing. Anytime you use iNaturalist, anywhere in Canada, your observations will automatically get pulled into those projects. We also have this identification period, so the City Nature Challenge goes until Monday, but people actually have until May 3rd to upload extra observations. So say you just took a bunch of photos on your phone and you have like 3,000 photos you want to upload and you can't get it all done by Monday, you have until May 3rd to actually finish uploading them, as long as the photo was taken during like the City Nature Challenge period, so from Friday to Monday. And I'm going to be on site at South Marsh Highlands on Sunday, along with City of Ottawa, and the City of Ottawa is also going to be at Cardinal Creek, Trim Road, with a little bit of info booth and people that are there to provide information and guide you through some naturals, so you need some hands-on work. And that's it. So did you do a question with Q&A kind of period, or I'm happy to, I can even jump back through some of the slides as needed and explain some other stuff. Yeah. That question was.
Yeah, for the recordings, I use Merlin as well. So is there a way to merge recordings together place? How is
Yeah,
do
I meant
that?
to mention, you can take the same way there's an option to take a photo or you upload a photo, you can record a sound.
Right, I saw that, and then
Yeah.
you just go there and somehow find
Yeah,
the.
so you can find your sound file and upload it the same way you would a photo. Or you can, in the app, if you say record sound now, it'll open up the microphone on your phone and you can actually just record the sound as you're going. There's no sound ID though in iNaturalist. So what you could do though is use Merlin to identify it and then write in the species name in iNaturalist. Because iNaturalist, I assume it's gonna happen, it's gonna be coming, but we don't yet have sound recording in iNaturalist. Like sound recording identification, I mean. Yeah.
Well, James actually used it to try and identify the frogs that were making noise.
Yeah.
And I did it right in iNaturalist, and it did identify, well, the experts identified
Yes.
the sounds
Yeah.
that I uploaded through iNaturalist.
Exactly, that is another way to do it, yeah, because you can just upload a sound, you'd be like bird, you can just call it a bird. And then experts, because the nice thing, if you label it as something, like if you label it as a frog, or you label it as bird, people who are looking to identify birds will sort through observations and they're like, I only want to find out and help people with birds, so they'll search for just for birds. If you leave it as like just completely unknown, they might not find it as quickly. So yes, experts can just listen to the call because they can do the playback in either they can do it in the app or online and help you identify things. Yeah. Yeah. I'll come back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited by this. I take photos all the time of animals, trees, flowers, pollinators. And I've had this past weekend was a Earth Day celebration in our park. And myself and a few others, we had displays of all these plant displays with lots of photos. And we have, all kinds of other information. One person does samples of bugs. And also there's a tree survey that I work on at the volunteer basis that we record. We're surveying the whole area of downtown called Centertown. So we had 5 years of it so far. And so we collect all kinds of data, including some photos of the tree.
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
was actually when we first showed a picture of the leaf, if anybody knew what it was. And
Yeah.
I know it's
I should have had a quiz there. Yeah.
I wonder, even though an oak might be quite familiar, a lot of people, it's a red oak and not a common oak or a white oak or a fir oak. And,
Yeah, and yeah, any uploading things like that, even street trees, like City of Ottawa has obviously a lot of planted trees and they keep a tally, I think, of all the ones that they've planted around the city, but there's a whole bunch of others that either have been planted or even just to understand the biodiversity of the City of Ottawa. Uploading to iNaturalist is great and can even create a sub-project that would tally just those trees that people are interested in. And then you can kind of have an easier way of filtering and finding those through iNaturalist too.
I wrote this one other thing, an interesting thing tonight, just before I had dinner, I looked out the back window and there was a rabbit or a hare. Not sure which it was.
Yeah.
And I did take a stone, I'm not sure, the window was kind of murky.
Test the, you can test the image recognition software to see if iNaturalist can idea.
Yeah, I didn't check that. But anyways, I hadn't seen it in a long time, but neighbors have said it's been around and I've seen footprints in the snow. But there it was.
Yeah, and on that note, on the image recognition, like, I'm shocked at how often iNaturalist gets the species right. The first one it suggests is quite often the right one. The ones that I know anyway. There's a bunch that I don't know. And then usually if I'm not 100% sure, I'll either look it up or I'll bump it up to like just the groups of like, I'll call it moths instead of like this super obscure moth, but I have no idea what it is. But the one species that I do know, it's like almost every time it gets it right. Just again, the better your photo is, the more likely it's going to get it right. So if you have a, a blurry photo through a window of a rabbit or a hare, it may not know, but if you get a really good, good shot, it's better off. Yeah.
And some of the apps are not always accurate. And it'll say, that's a pine or something. It's like, no, it's not the deciduous tree, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's good when you got enough experience, you can tell that.
Did you want to follow up on your question from before?
A different one, unless there's anyone online. For edit license, I know there's something to bring to people's attention about choosing 3 or best that will enable scientists to use the data. And
Yeah, for your photo licenses?
yes.
Yes.
The no copyright attribution, non-commercial, etc.
Yeah, and that's
Just to
going
bring
to show
to
the
that.
account settings. You can do that in the app or online and like in your account on iNaturalist, but yes. I wasn't gonna get into the detail, but that's a good point. There's a little bit of a nuance there of like whether it gets shared for science. We do get access to, as I said, as CWF and our partners, we get access to all that data. So it is still shared for science, whatever you set your photo licenses to for our purposes here in Canada. But there's a global, it's called the Global Biodiversity Information Framework, which mines iNaturalist and a bunch of other databases to like make this mass amalgamation of all this data through eBird and iNaturalist and eButterfly, like a bunch of these platforms. And they only can get the data that there's certain licenses. And when you go into your settings, they'll specify which ones those are. There's 3, right? And if you choose one of those 3, then that gets shared to this GBIF database. Which is the best way to do it. I set my licenses that way. You still get to retain, like people would have to give you credit for your photo with some of those anyway, and they can't just go and make money off of it with some of those. You can completely set it to just be open and anybody can use it, do what they want with it. But still within the ones that can get shared for science, there's still a way to kind of retain your recognition and rights of those for sure. Yeah.
Do you have, I just downloaded, do you have to form an account because it says?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I kind of skipped over that, but yes, you need an account.
You can.
And it's free, and the only information you need to provide with your account is an email address. You don't have to give any other personal information or anything like that. The reason that we want to do that is because it's like a bit of a dialogue situation, right? So if you upload something and an expert sees it and wants to get some information, they have to be able to connect with you on the platform, not through your own email. Your email's never shared with anybody outside of just the back end of iNaturalist. It's never shared. But there's a message function within iNaturalist, so people can message you or they can comment on your observation, and then through that, you can see that and then write back to them, kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you like share some examples of how when people can participate in this, how is it valuable for science? What are they able to do with this data?
Yeah.
In terms of dealing with climate change or medical or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
What exactly are they able to do that they might not be able to do without people participating and doing these things?
Yeah, well, I mean, like that example of the plant that was rediscovered in Canada, that would not have been found if it wasn't for someone uploading a photo to iNaturalist. So now that plant exists or is known to exist in that part of the country, it's partly owned by the city, so now the city can take steps to make sure that it doesn't get mowed over essentially. That's one example. Another one is about 3 years ago, there was a person in Quebec, kind of halfway between here and Quebec City, took a picture of an elm leaf that had a chew pattern. They just figured it was a moth or an insect that chewed on this leaf. A researcher from the US saw it and then showed it to a researcher in Germany who then confirmed as a sawfly species called the elm zigzag sawfly. And it's an invasive species that's never been seen in North America before, but it was found here in Canada. Probably got in through some shipping containers or whatever. And then the CFIA, which is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency who manages invasive pests, they sent a team to that area to go and investigate, take samples, and now they're tracking the spread of this species. Now it's been, I think there's about 300 observations of it on iNaturalist now, but they're trying to contain that as an outbreak because of an iNaturalist observation that found it here in Canada by someone, again, who had no idea what it was. They just thought it was a moth or something like that and chewed the leaf, a caterpillar type thing. But, yeah, a couple examples of that's being used. I know CFIA is also using it to do like early detection of invasive species. So they're basically mining the data out of iNaturalist to see if there's any things that are showing up in Canada that haven't been here before or that are spreading, to know like how to curb the spread of invasive species.
Are they able to attribute what they're seeing to patterns and what's happening with the climate as a whole in the weather pattern?
Yeah, that's a longer term question. So we've had a naturalist in Canada for about 11 years. Probably now we're getting enough data, but it's, you know, it's going to be looking forward. I think it's where it's going to be most useful of like looking at what we have now as baseline data almost for the last decade-ish, and then seeing where things project in the future. But I've been working with a university prof at McGill that was looking at these like landscape level changes with biodiversity data. And yeah, she and her grad students are looking at like the shifts of species ranges and distribution models of where species might go and will go, and using that naturalist data to form the basis of that.
So yeah, related to the leaf that was chewed, how would you post that, or I guess the note might be able to capture it from the note or something.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So the person took a photo of the leaf, you're right, and said, this isn't the elm leaf that I'm trying to upload. It's like, then that would be in the notes, like, there's this chew pattern, you don't know what it is. I think the original identifier or observer identified it as like moth species. And so that kind of tipped people off to say, like, okay, you're not thinking of the elm leaf.
Okay.
What I would tend to do in that is I would upload it twice almost. I would upload it once as the elm observation and once as the insect observation. You can kind of duplicate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will there be a similar following of the Japanese beetle spread?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how closely CFIA, like how closely they're looking at iNaturalist for that, but I'm sure there's tons of them. But that's cool. I could go online right now and see where all the Japanese beetle observations in Canada. You know, there's probably thousands of them. Yeah. Definitely.
We can actually research a particular species and shows where.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I showed that map of the heat map and the points of all those observations. There's a bunch of filters that you can apply on that. One would be you could just search for a species within that, and it'll show just that species. And this is online. I find that more usable than the app when you're looking for data type stuff. You can search by species. You can search by species group. So you can look for just all amphibians, and it would show all frogs and salamanders. You can search by an area. You can search by people. Like if you have people that you know of that are on iNaturalist, you can use their username and you can find where all just their observations are. So there's a lot of search functions that you can look at.
Share your written online. But
Yeah, I was wondering that. I don't see any hands up or anything.
Folks online.
Oh,
Surely
there's-
you must have some questions for
I
James.
see there's some
or
chat. But I
comments.
haven't
There's some
looked at
chat
it.
going.
Is there anything you can read out that's a question?
Yeah.
You want to stop sharing, maybe we'll be able to see whoever's online.
Sure, yeah. Good idea. Yeah, so so what's the most vague, thing, if you don't know what it is, I guess like insect or something or whatever, right? That's still useful to just. Yeah, and again, the better the photo, the more useful it is. So if you have like a blurry insect, someone's not gonna help you out with that very much. But if you can get a good in sharp focus, yeah, I'm sure, I can't think, trying to think of some examples that might have been like some cool new finds based on some kind of vague. I'm sure there's gotta be some, but yeah, like if you label it as an insect, entomologists who are like experts that study insects would be filtering just observations of insects, and they can identify a lot of them. I mean, there's some things you can't identify by photo. So there are definitely limitations to iNaturalist of like, there's I don't know how many different species of like hoverfly or like, some of them you can't differentiate one from the other without dissecting or microscopes or that kind of stuff, but a lot of things you can. Right. And it's interesting because you could see, you'll get a notification if someone comments back and exactly does identify it. So if you say, oh, yeah, they can tag you, or they don't even have to tag you, but on your observation days, you can see in your, like, there's like a dashboard within iNaturalist, which is kind of like your home page. Yeah. And you see all your activity, and you see who's commented on your observations, who's identified them. If somebody has a question, you can see, that. And cool thing is it keeps a list of everything you've ever observed in iNaturalist. So you can go back and like, look back over the years, or be like, oh, I was on this hike and I saw this cool thing, I can't remember what it was. You can go back to your own photos and see what you kept up with stuff.
Is this something that recommend or not recommend for people who want to foraging, like eating stuff in the woods and?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a story, I think it was out of Australia last year, of this woman who used iNaturalist to identify poisonous mushrooms to poison her family with. So you can use it to identify things.
That's great.
It's not a good news story. I definitely would not recommend it to trust it blindly, to be like, that's safety, and that's not. I wouldn't even trust good field guides unless you really know what you're looking at. iNaturalist is good, but I wouldn't trust my life with it. Yeah. But if you're not actually going to eat it, it can definitely identify, and I don't know mushrooms very well, and I use it to identify mushrooms to like take photos of and upload. And I'll take a photo and I'll identify it as what the app says, and I'll look at they'll give you options of different photos, and I'll look at the different species and think, I think it's that one. I usually will label it as that, and most of the time I wait for an expert to weigh in, and most of the time they say, yeah, that's the right species. So it's pretty good.
Along the travel lines, I haven't gotten around to it, but I have photos from the Amazon and cloud forest in Ecuador, and I haven't gotten around to figure out where to put that. So is it like iNaturalist Canada, and then the location will end up in Ecuador, and they'll use that?
Yeah, any app, because so like, I think Ecuador doesn't have its own version. Doesn't matter. Anything that we did it. I don't know. Might have. I know Mexico has one. There's
a lot of biodiversity there.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So I can go to iNaturalist Ecuador.
You can go to iNaturalist Canada because the backend database works amongst each other. So if you upload it to iNaturalist Canada, it still plots it in Ecuador, and someone looking at the data in Ecuador will still see it. When I showed the heat map of observations in Canada, I just filtered it to Canada, cut out all the noise, but I could remove that, and in iNaturalist Canada, I can search anywhere in the world. I could take off the filter for Canada and check anything. And there's, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, 600 million observations, I think, around the world. It's insane the number of observations that there are. Yeah. And it's great for going on a trip. You're like, oh, if I'm going to Ecuador, what might I see, right? And you can just filter or check your area and be like, what are the species that are there? Yes.
Do you have any suggestions for this city nature challenge of like where to go?
That's a good question. One of my pipe dreams is to develop a map, online map that people can like click areas or see their city and be like, oh, here's a green space, it's public access that I can go and make observations for, whether it's City Nature Challenge or any time of the year. It might actually happen when we develop something in the near future, but short of that, a great place to start, I would suggest, is the satellite view of Google Maps. And you can see the green spaces easily, right? And then you like zoom in and a lot of the parks are mapped. Usually the large green spaces tend to be public land, like the green belt shows up here in Ottawa, Cabinet Park will show up. So I use kind of that as a good starting point, especially if it's a city I don't know. But for Ottawa specifically, yeah, it's the green belt, Cabinet Park, if you want to go on the Quebec side, anywhere along the Ottawa River, there's some great pathways. This time of year, if you're looking for diversity, I try to hit up 2 different areas. Like I'll go along the Ottawa River to maybe get some shorter observations. And then I'll go into like the green belt and get a whole bunch of invasive species observations because it's got tons of buckthorn and what's the other one? Montessori. It's can't think of the common name now. Yeah, the honeysuckle. A lot of non-native things through the greenbelt. There's some other areas like Blue Bog. You'll get some sphagnum. There's some pitcher plants there, sundew, which are some kind of rare things, and those ones are up all year round, so you'd see them early in the season too.
You could also go to the map and look for areas where that people haven't captured.
Yes.
Too, right? Because I did look and I saw a whole green area.
Yeah.
And people, for whatever reason, hadn't been posting. So then you want to capture a little bit more.
Exactly. That's a great option. Yeah, is to see where there aren't a bunch of those points on the map. Key is to make sure you have access and property access, right? It might just be like D&D land or something. Yeah.
Climbing fence.
Yeah. We have a disclaimer on Naturalist that we're not responsible for anything people do. Yeah.
Any other questions, folks, or last comments, please?
Yeah, one thing I didn't get into and mention, I mentioned the obscuring, so if you don't want people to know like if it's your backyard or whatever, we want to keep the species safe as well. So there's some species at risk because of poaching. We have American ginseng in Canada, a bunch of the turtles, they actually get poached and sold on the black market for too much money. And so there's a list of about 200 species in Canada that we obscure automatically. And some of them we don't even show on iNaturalist, like this private idea, like where it doesn't even show up on the map, like American ginseng and a couple of turtle species, because if people find them, big likelihood someone will go and poach it. And so we have about 200 species that are automatically hidden. Some of them are obscured so that they're mapped, but they don't show the true location. And then we get the actual location as like the data side of things. But just to make sure that some species aren't overly loved, or even some areas that like rare orchids or some of the owls that people don't over observe them either and accidentally trample some vegetation in
Chargers.
Yeah.
Would it identify that, like if you're trying to identify something, then, this thing that. It's secret.
Yeah.
Does it say that?
It doesn't, and that's something I'd like to do is, I mean, I'm not, so it's iNaturalist.org is the app itself, and the backend database is built in the US, and we partnered with them to create the Canadian version. But I meet with them regularly, and that's something I suggested and would like to implement, is that like, it's exactly that, it's like, oh, you've seen this like obscure thing, great, that's super cool, and just to know it's gonna be hidden, just so that to keep the species safe.
Maybe someone will then know maybe it's valuable.
True.
Because of that,
Yeah.
good trigger.
Yeah.
Why is it hidden? Oh, maybe it's valuable.
Yeah.
That could.
Like they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
No, if you take the photo.
Oh.
Yeah, true, photo would idea, yeah. I
But
like
the
to,
but the thing is, it goes to iNaturalist and it's used.
Yeah.
So it's just not.
Yeah.
Publicized.
and I'd like to build in more prompts in iNaturalist of like, whether it's one that we need to hide, or just like a rare species that like when people take a photo of it, that iNaturalist can flag it and be like, hey, this is the first observation for your town of this species, just to like encourage people to make that effort and do more observations.
Right.
Great.
Thank you so much, James.
Well, thank you all for your interest too. Yeah.
James, I'd like to present an environmental document, One Planet, One Habitation. It's published by the Baha'i International Community. It's about recasting our relationship with nature.
Very cool. Nice.
So I hope you
Thank you
enjoy
very
it.
much, yeah.
And for folks who want to look at it, I've got one copy on the back table. I think Erin has a link to an online version. And we've also got information on the table about the City Nature Challenge and how to participate. A lot of other environmental information. I think Erin also has the same documents to share to those who are online. So I hope that everyone takes advantage of that. For folks in the room, there are refreshments as well, and opportunity to chat. And I want to just thank everyone for coming this evening and those online who also participated. And stay tuned for emails if you've signed up for other updates that we have on other events. Let's give a round of applause to some of our musicians. And Erin, who made this meeting possible. And also to the Ottawa Environment Forum, it's really a team of people. You don't see them all here, but they're responsible for pulling these talks together. And thanks once again to James for spending his evening with us, a really wonderful presentation. I learned a lot. Good night to those of you who are still online. Thank you very much for coming.
So, love that James